How do we actually know what we know? It's a fundamental question, isn't it?
It really is, and it leads right into another one. What gives different ways of understanding the world their authority?
Exactly. And today, we're diving into that through the eyes of a real giant of thought, Jean Piaget. But maybe not the Piaget everyone expects.
Right, most people hear Piaget and think, okay, child development, stages of learning, which is true. He revolutionized that field.
Absolutely. But we're looking at a different side of him today, through his book, Insights and Illusions of Philosophy. Here, he takes that incredibly sharp analytical mind.
The mind that studied how kids think.
Yes, and he turns it inward, critiquing the very foundations of knowledge and philosophy itself. It's quite a powerful personal take.
It's fascinating because it wasn't just an academic exercise for him. He literally called it an account of a disenchantment. That's strong language.
It really is. It points to something deeply personal.
So our mission today, I think, is to explore that journey. His early hopes for philosophy, why he got disillusioned, and crucially, how he distinguished scientific knowledge from philosophical wisdom.
And why he saw certain philosophical approaches as, well, illusions, things that actually get in the way of finding truth.
Precisely. It's a story of shifting perspectives.
Okay, let's unpack this. So where did Piaget even begin? You mentioned his early scientific bent.
Oh, yeah. Amazingly early. He was publishing papers on mollusks, snails and clams when he was just 15.
15, wow.
I know. So right from the start, you see this mind grounded in observation in the empirical details of the natural world.
But then, surprisingly, his first big intellectual passion was philosophy.
It was. He read Henri Bergson's Creative Evolution and described it as a tremendous experience, like truly formative.
What was so captivating about it for him?
It seemed to offer these grand answers, a way to potentially reconcile science and religion even. Bergson talked about this élan vital, this life force.
The vital impulse idea.
Exactly. And Piaget initially saw it as a way to maybe equate God with this life force. He was actually planning to devote his whole life to philosophy, hoping to unify everything.
A grand ambition.
Yeah.
But something shifted.
Right. Seeds of doubt started to appear, apparently sparked by his logic teacher, a guy named Arnold Raymond, who critiqued Bergson.
So the critique landed.
It seems so. And this is where it gets really interesting. You can see Piaget wrestling with these ideas in his own early philosophical writing.
Like what?
Well, things like his outline of neopragmatism. He was trying to bridge Bergson's vitalism with the rigor of mathematics. He even imagined a science of kinds, like focused on structures, separate from the science of laws.
Time to build a bridge.
Yeah, but through that work, he hit a wall, philosophically speaking. He started realizing that logic and math concepts weren't just abstract thoughts floating around, they were operational.
Operational, meaning?
Meaning tied to actions, to what we do, tied to behavioral activities. It led him to this, stark realization. An idea is only an idea, and a fact is simply a fact.
That sounds like a major turning point, a real fork in the road.
Absolutely. That realization is what pushed him firmly towards experimental psychology. He ended up working in Alfred Binet's lab in Paris.
The intelligence test guy.
Very same. And there, Piaget felt he'd finally found a way to pursue epistemology, the study of knowledge, but with a solid respect for the facts. That was his shift. No turning back.
So even when he later held titles like psychologist, philosopher.
He saw his own work, his genetic epistemology, studying the development of knowledge as fundamentally scientific, independent of all philosophy, rooted in verification.
Which brings us back to that disenchantment. It sounds like it stemmed from this core conflict he perceived.
Yes, a conflict between the scientist's need for verification, the biologist, the psychologist, and the philosopher's tendency towards speculative reflection.
Different ways of operating.
Totally different. And this led him to draw a really fundamental line between knowledge and wisdom.
Okay, let's break that down. What did he mean by knowledge?
For Piaget, knowledge the scientific kind absolutely required a publicly verifiable method of testing. Facts needed evidence anyone could check. Or, for things like math, rigorous logical methods, what he called logistic methods.
So objectivity is key. Intersubjectivity.
Exactly. Objective or inter-individual criteria of truth. He was really strong on this. He said truth only exists as truth once it's been verified by others, not just accepted on faith or intuition.
And asserting facts without that verification.
He called it intellectual dishonesty. Pretty blunt.
Okay, so that's knowledge. What about wisdom then? Where does philosophy fit in?
He saw wisdom as philosophy's proper domain. He described it as a rational coordination of values, thinking reasonably about what matters, including cognitive values like truth itself.
So more about meaning and values than verifiable facts.
Right, it involves factors of conviction or faith, leading to what he called a rational faith, a reasoned belief system, maybe, but distinct from scientific knowledge.
Which explains that quote.
There can be several wisdoms, while there exists only one truth. Yeah, that perfectly captures it. Multiple valid ways to live a meaningful life, but only one set of verifiable facts about the world at any given time.
It's not really diminishing philosophy then, is it? It's clarifying its role.
I think that's his aim. He wasn't anti-philosophy per se, but anti-certain philosophical tendencies. He wanted science to remain indefinitely open, always exploring, not limited by philosophical dogma like positivism sometimes tried to do.
Which leads us to those illusions he identified. What were the main pitfalls he saw?
Okay, so he flags 3 big ones. The first is basically speculation without verification.
Just thinking things up without checking.
Kind of. He acknowledged speculation is vital for generating ideas, hypotheses, a heuristic introduction, he called it. But if you stop there without testing those ideas empirically or logically, it just stays subjective.
It feels right, but you don't know it's right.
Exactly. It gives intuitive satisfaction or seems self-evident, but that's not the same as proof.
Okay, illusion number 1. Unchecked speculation. What's 2?
The second is a bit surprising. Philosophy's dependence on social and political factors.
How so? You mean ideas changing with the times?
More than just changing, being unduly influenced by them, he saw in Swiss Protestant thought after the wars, becoming sort of narrower, and more worryingly, he noted how anti-experimental psychology rose in Germany alongside the social problems leading up to Hitler.
Wow.
Yeah, and he even heard philosophers admit that certain philosophical views, even if true, might be socially dangerous, which then influenced whether they'd adopt those views. Truth took a backseat to social consequence.
So less about objective truth, more about social palatability or ideology.
That seemed to be his concern. He talked about Platonism being justified by an effective halo. It felt good, it appealed emotionally rather than being logically or empirically sound in a given context. That susceptibility worried him.
Okay, that's a serious charge. And the third illusion.
This one really seemed to get under his skin. Philosophers prescribing norms to science, telling scientists how they should think or what they should study from a philosophical high ground.
The turf war. I remember you mentioned he got wrongly labeled a positivist.
Right. Even though he championed science's openness, he described this dialogue of the deaf with a professor who actually praised a type of psychology because it wasn't experimental.
That's backward from a scientific view.
Completely. The argument was often that psychology, as just one science, had to follow philosophy's general laws of knowledge. But Piaget saw that as a vicious circle.
How so?
Because, he argued, you need objective psychology to actually discover how people like children develop their understanding of logic, space, number. You can't just deduce it from an armchair. Philosophers were deciding these huge questions of fact without the fact.
Which brings us to that amazing anecdote about G.E. Moore.
Oh, yeah, classic. Moore, this eminent philosopher, hears about Piaget's studies on kids' false ideas. Like not understanding that water poured into a tall, thin glass is the same amount as in a short, wide one.
The conservation tests.
Exactly. And Moore just dismisses it. Of no interest at all, he says. Why? Because philosophy only cares about true ideas.
Wow. Just, wow.
Right? But Piaget's comeback was perfect. He basically asked, well, how do you know your true ideas today won't be seen as inadequate later? Doesn't this suggest knowledge develops, that it's about progressive approximations?
Mic drop. That perfectly captures the scientific mindset versus a more fixed philosophical one he was critiquing.
It really does. Science expects to be wrong and corrects itself. That philosophy seemed to want eternal truths handed down.
Piaget used specific examples to really drive this home, didn't he? Like the Bergson clash with Einstein you mentioned earlier.
Yes, that's a prime example of philosophical overreach, in Piaget's view. Bergson built his whole system on these sharp divides: life versus matter, instinct versus intelligence, subjective time versus spatialized physical time.
And he insisted intuition was the way to grasp life, not analytical intelligence.
Right. So when Einstein comes along and shows that physical time isn't just an empty container, but is actually relative, dynamic, tied to velocity and the observer, well, it messed with Bergson's neat categories.
Especially since Einstein's physics-based time had qualities, like being influenced by content, that sounded a bit like Bergson's own lived duration.
Exactly, the irony. But instead of saying, maybe reality is more complex than my philosophical system allowed, Bergson doubled down.
He tried to refute Einstein on
And
physics.
he jumped into a highly technical scientific debate, arguing from his philosophical stance, claiming Einstein was fundamentally mistaken about physics. It was not his finest hour.
And the book he wrote about it.
Was eventually removed from his collected works. Kind of speaks for itself, doesn't it? A cautionary tale about philosophy dictating to science.
Piaget also pointed out how later science, like molecular biology and cybernetics, further blurred those lines Bergson drew so sharply.
Right. Concepts like teleonomy systems, acting purposefully without conscious design, showed you could bridge the gap between the living and the physical chemical in ways Bergson insisted were impossible. Science found continuity where philosophy had demanded dualism.
He also took aim at what he called philosophical psychology. What was that about?
This was philosophers like Husserl, Sartre, Merleau-Ponty trying to create a psychology based on introspection, reflecting on consciousness, looking for timeless essences, separate from experimental psychology.
Husserl trying to grasp essences by bracketing out the real world. Sartre seeing the psyche as irrational, emotion as magical.
Yeah. Piaget found this whole approach really problematic. For one, he saw it as trying to derive a norm, what's true, from a fact, a subjective feeling or intuition, which he thought was logically flawed.
You don't need an irrational method to study irrationality.
Precisely. He argued scientific psychology, using abstract models, even cybernetics, could analyze complex things like meaning and intention and behavior much more rigorously than just introspection could.
And Merleau-Ponty's focus on the lived world, the immediate experience.
Piaget felt that led to an impasse. It ignored how knowledge actually develops over time, historically, and in the individual. Focusing only on subjective experience created ambiguity, as Piaget argued. That might just be artifacts of the philosophical system itself, not features of reality.
So the core issue for Piaget, running through all this, seems to be about verification and stepping outside oneself.
Exactly. Verification and objectivity, which requires what he called decentration.
Decentration, moving beyond the self.
Yes. It's this crucial process in science of overcoming your own immediate viewpoint, your biases, your centrations, to reach a perspective that others can share and verify. Intersubjectivity again.
And he had that incredible personal story about the nurse.
Oh, the fake kidnapping. It's so vivid. He remembered the scratches, the torn clothes, the drama. He had this completely clear, detailed memory from childhood.
But it was all fake.
Totally fabricated by the nurse. He found out years later it was a powerful lesson for him. Even our most vivid, certain seeming introspections or memories can be utterly wrong. They aren't reliable grounds for objective truth on their own.
Whereas decentration is the engine of scientific progress.
He saw it that way. From realizing the Earth isn't the center of the universe, to Einstein's relativity challenging our intuitive notions of space and time, it's all about decentering, correcting our ingrained perspectives to get a better grasp on reality.
While the philosophical psychology he criticized
Often seemed to skip that step. Under the banner of studying intuitions or essences, it neglected objectivity and verification, leading to what he called impressionism, just subjective takes.
You can see why he described those dialogues of the deaf, like arguing with Scherer about moral development.
Right. Piaget does careful studies, observes how kids' moral reasoning actually changes from egocentric to reciprocal, and the philosopher counters with, like, a common-sense story about a dishonest lawyer and a nice kid.
Apples and oranges.
Completely. It exemplifies the problem.
Yeah.
Philosophers, assuming their expertise in norms, how things should be, automatically gave them insight into the mechanisms, how things actually work. They judged the science without understanding the facts or methods.
Leading to that dynamic where scientists seeking objectivity are accused of ignoring the subject.
While philosophers projecting their own subjectivity are seen as speaking for the universal subject. It's a frustrating loop.
And he noticed that irony too, science striving for unity, philosophy seeming to revel in different schools of thought.
Yeah, he saw scientists trying to build bridges, find converging methods, while philosophy often seemed to emphasize the differences between systems, plus that public perception issue.
Where philosophers can critique science freely, but a scientist questioning philosophy is treason.
Exactly. A power imbalance that hindered open, critical dialogue about knowledge itself.
So after all this critique, what did Piaget see as the positive role for philosophy? Where does it fit?
He still saw immense value. He believed philosophy's best contributions to actual knowledge came from reflecting on the sciences, synthesizing findings, asking broader questions prompted by scientific discovery.
But its primary unique role is defining wisdom.
Yes, that rational coordination of the whole picture, including values, making sense of reality in its totality, finding meaning. That's philosophy's strength, but it's not the same as generating verifiable knowledge.
And the way forward, the remedy for the illusion of philosophical oversight.
For Piaget, it was clear. Interdisciplinary collaboration among the sciences, breaking down silos, scientists talking to each other, integrating different kinds of evidence.
He mentions that linguist at the philosophy conference.
Oh, right. Saying that for questions about meaning, the answers would likely come from experimental psychology, not philosophy. A pretty bold statement in that setting.
It really underscores his point about where verifiable knowledge increasingly comes from.
But again, it's not a total dismissal. He credits his own philosophical training for framing the big questions that drove his entire scientific career.
So it gave him the problems.
Exactly. But he insists, I have only been able to approach the solution by abandoning the reflective methods of the philosopher and embracing experiment and logic. He needed the scientific toolkit to answer the philosophical questions.
And he ends on a pretty optimistic note about science, doesn't he?
He does. He sees science, especially fields like psychology, as having this infinite openness and, crucially, this capacity for irreversible self-correction.
Learning from mistakes.
Yes. It is not possible to be deceived twice in the same fashion. That inherent mechanism for correcting errors gives science its vitality and, for Piaget, its ultimate advantage in the pursuit of knowledge.
So reflecting on all this, what's the main takeaway for us, for you listening? Piaget isn't saying ditch philosophy.
Not at all. He's asking for clarity. Recognize what science does best: verification, objectivity, building knowledge brick by a verifiable brick. And recognize what philosophy does best: grappling with wisdom, values, meaning, the bigger picture.
Things science can't give us answers to.
Right. Which leads to a really interesting question for all of us, I think. In your own life, how do you draw that line?
Between what you can know through evidence and testing and what you need to believe or coordinate as part of your own wisdom, your own way of making sense of it all.
Yeah. Do you sometimes look for scientific certainty where maybe only philosophical reflection or personal conviction can apply? Or vice versa, relying on intuition when empirical evidence is really what's needed?
It's a challenge, isn't it? To be rigorous, to practice that decentration Piaget talks about, push past our biases when seeking knowledge.
But also to acknowledge that deep human need for meaning, for values, for wisdom, which science alone doesn't fully address.
Finding that balance, that seems to be the enduring challenge Piaget leaves us with. Definitely something to think about.
Absolutely. Until our next deep dive.